Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for joining our discussion on student loan forgiveness tonight. My name is Catherine. I am the Commons Program Associate for Prince George's County Memorial Library System. Tonight, we're lucky to have Dr. Tisa Silver Canady with us. She is an author and personal finance expert specializing in collegiate financial education and wellness. Since 2012, Tisa has personally advised students and families on the repayment of more than $75 million in student loan debt. She works to help students of all ages complete education beyond high school without major college debt. During the presentation, please feel free to submit any questions to the chat. Tisa has graciously offered to answer any questions at the end of the program. Without further ado, let's hear from Dr. Tisa.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for having me. It was just 1 year ago that I did my first event on student loan
Yes.
forgiveness with the library system. So it's always good to be with you, especially since I'm from Prince George's County. All right. So let's get into tonight's presentation, Understanding Student Loan Forgiveness. Before I get into the specifics of some currently available student loan forgiveness programs, I just wanted to give you a brief bit of an introduction to the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. Then we'll do a deep dive into loan types and how to access those benefits, specifically the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, income-driven repayment by way of the IDR adjustment, as well as public service loan forgiveness. And I'll wrap up with sharing some resources for Marylanders and then Q&A. So the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness is a nonprofit organization that I started in 2021 with the goal of helping students and families build their financial life skills and empowering them to thrive. We have an ambitious vision for all of Maryland's college and career school students. And the idea is that they will be able to achieve these 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness. And I'm not going to read through all the small text, so don't worry. I'll just tell you the 6 pillars. That's to be credit worthy, ready, resilient, empowered, successful, and thriving. So if that sounds like work that you're interested in, I'd encourage you to visit us online at mccfw.org to learn more about the organization and how we carry out our work. As for the information that's presented during tonight's presentation, I must stress that the information is shared for informational purposes only. It should not be construed as financial or legal advice. We do our best to provide you with the most reliable and up-to-date information, but sometimes that information changes. And so we encourage you to take what you hear this evening, but also look at your loans, your documents, your household situation before you make any decisions. And just know that you're responsible for those decisions. We're happy to assist you in that process, though. So now that we've got that out of the way, I want to go right into student loan forgiveness and how the type of loans you have impacts the benefits that you're able to access. Before I get into the specific programs, I just wanted to conduct kind of a screener of sorts by talking about loan types because I would not want for you to sit here and listen to me talk for 30 minutes and then find out at the end that all the programs that I spoke about have nothing to do with the types of loans in your portfolio. So we're going to talk a bit about the different types of loans that there are. At the highest level, there are federal student loans and there are private student loans. Federal student loans are issued by the US government from the Department of Education. And even within those loans, there's some older types of loans that are considered federal student loans, but were originated by banks. So those loans are still federal, but they're kind of like a subset of truly federal student loans. On the other side, we have private loans. Private loans are originated by alternative lenders such as banks, and these loans have nothing to do with federal student loans. So they're completely outside of the purview of the federal government. Now, that means we've got 2 categories, federal and private. Within federal loans, there are loans that are called ed-held, which means they are held by the Department of Education. And then there are commercially held federal student loans. Those are federal student loans that are held by private banks. And I know that it gets really tricky, so I wanted to give you all this chart so that you can just differentiate between those types of loans and see how the type of loan influences the types of benefits that you'll have access to. So let's take a look at Department of Education held federal student loans first. The 3 programs that I'm going to speak about tonight are the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. That's the plan that offers up to $20,000 for most federal student loan borrowers, as well as public service loan forgiveness. That's a more targeted program geared toward people who work in careers that count as public service. And then income-driven repayment. The IDR adjustment is a fairly new plan that will provide relief most quickly for people who have been in repayment for several years. If you have federal student loans that are held by the Department of Education, then your loans would make you eligible potentially for all three of these programs. With public service loan forgiveness, you have to have qualifying employment along with the right types of loans. But having those Department of Education held loans means that you don't have to take any further action like consolidating to make those loans eligible. Because they're held by the Department of Education already, they would be eligible for these programs. That subset of federal student loans that I mentioned earlier, commercially held federal student loans, those are going to require a bit more work. When it comes to the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, which offers that $20,000 potential benefit to most federal student loan borrowers, unfortunately, that program does not cover commercially held federal student loans. At some point, there was a pathway for borrowers with commercially held federal student loans to consolidate into the direct loan program and gain relief through the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. But that option was taken away effective September 29th. So if you have not consolidated those older commercially held federal student loans, right now there is no way for them to be considered eligible for the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. Fortunately, when it comes to public service loan forgiveness and that income-driven repayment adjustment, the details of which we'll get into very soon, there is a pathway for people who have commercially held federal student loans to consolidate and gain eligibility for those benefits. Unfortunately, if you have private loans, the loans that are strictly originated by lending institutions or banks, those loans are not going to receive any benefit that's available to federal student loan borrowers in terms of cancellation. So the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, public service loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment, and the adjustment, none of these programs would apply to truly private loans. So now that we know the difference between federal student loans and private student loans, as well as ed-held loans and commercially held loans, I want you to know how you can figure out what types of loans you have. So to find out if your loans are held by the Department of Education, you want to log into studentaid.gov. That is the absolute best place for you to go if you're interested in seeing all of your federal student loans, information about your servicers, as well as completing applications like consolidating and applying for public service loan forgiveness. Once you log into studentaid.gov, you'll arrive on a dashboard. That dashboard is going to have an option to view your servicer details. And when you click on the option to view your servicer details, you're looking for Department of Ed. And if Department of Ed is in front of the name of your actual servicer, that means that your federal student loans are indeed held by the Department of Education. Also, if the loans happen to be in default, you might see default management collection systems there. That means your loans are held by the Department of Education as well. If you do not see those terms and you see the name of a bank or just the servicer, then that would mean that your loans are not held by the Department of Education. It doesn't mean that you are completely ruled out of student loan forgiveness programs. It just means there may be a few extra steps you need to take in order to transition those commercially held loans into a space of being eligible for these student loan forgiveness benefits. So it's really important for you to, again, log into studentaid.gov, look at your loan servicers, and make that determination of whether your loans are held by the Department of Education or held by a commercial bank, because that is going to determine the types of forgiveness programs you have access to. So let's talk about the plan that everyone else is talking about. That is the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. This plan was announced on August the 24th and would provide up to $20,000 for eligible federal student loan borrowers. But much has happened in the months since that plan was originally announced. It seems like something is happening every month, if not sooner. But August 24th, the plan was announced. Then on September 29th, information about the plan was updated to remove eligibility from borrowers with commercially held FFELP loans. Those are the types of loans that I was just speaking of that originally allowed people to consolidate into the direct loan program to gain access to this Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. But that option was taken away And I believe the reason it was taken away was due to a lawsuit that was filed. The next month, the application opened, and last I heard, more than 26 million people had submitted applications through the website. It was a really easy application, asked you for some personally identifying information, but didn't require anyone to log into studentaid.gov or create an FSA account. They made it as easy as I think they possibly could. So the application opened on October 17th, and there was a lot of traffic. Unfortunately, the following month, shortly after midterm elections, the plan was blocked by a judge in Texas. As a result of that ruling, no new applications are being accepted at this time, and no cancellation will be processed. There are a couple of lawsuits in the pipeline, and we know that in February of 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments related to the legality of the Biden-Harris student debt relief plan. So right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern, just watching and waiting to see what will happen. If you want the latest updates related to federal student loans, and particularly the happenings with the Biden-Harris student debt relief plan, I'd encourage you to visit the Department of Education online at ed.gov/subscriptions. And that way you can subscribe to updates that are specifically for student loan borrowers. All right. So a part of the plan was the application. And if you completed the application like I did, you probably received an email from the Department of Education explaining that there are some things going on that are preventing the actual cancellation from taking place. So I just wanted to provide you with a portion of the email that I received related to my application for relief through this program. And sometimes when you receive emails like this from the Department of Education or from your servicer, uh, it might be a bit hard to digest because there's usually a lot of information involved. So I just pulled out a few key points that I wanted to share with you. The first one is you are eligible for relief under the plan. So that tells me that they evaluated my application and they have decided that I am eligible for relief. The second point is you do not need to take any further action. There is nothing that any of us can do to make this process move any faster. It's in the hands of the courts now, and we'll have to wait until the Supreme Court hears arguments and makes a decision. So right now, if you completed the application, there's nothing else you need to do. The third point is that lawsuits have blocked our ability to discharge your debt at present. So in a nutshell, if you receive this particular email, this means that if the plan is deemed legal and it's allowed to proceed, then your debt will be discharged according to the program's eligibility criteria. So again, we are just waiting, watching to see what will happen with the Supreme Court. And if the program is deemed legal, then we can expect to see the cancellation come through, and our student loan balances will reflect that debt cancellation in the weeks following that decision. I just wanted to give you all some information about eligibility criteria for the program. And this chart, I like to think of things in processes. So for me, it's answer these questions, and depending on your answers to these questions, I can tell you how much you should be eligible for in terms of the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. So the first question we've already touched on, that is, are your loans federally held loans? Are they held by the Department of Education? You would verify that by visiting studentaid.gov, and if your answer is yes, then we move on to the next question. Question number 2 has to do with the timing of your loans. And that question is, were your loans originally dispersed before June 30th of 2022? Again, the place to go to find the answer to that question is studentaid.gov. You can view a complete history of any federal student loans or grants you've received. And if you see that the original loans were dispersed before June 30th of 2022, would mean that those loans can qualify for relief through this plan. A quick note for people who consolidated after June 30th, but potentially before that change was made on September 29th. If you had commercially held FFELP loans and you consolidated them before that option was taken away in late September, the original loan disbursement dates would be used to determine your eligibility for this program. So they would not look at your recent consolidation loan and say, you're ineligible because you just created this loan. They would see your consolidation loan, but they would look into that loan to see the disbursement dates of the original loans that were included in the consolidation. And since those loans were originated before June 30th of 2022, that would make them eligible for relief through this plan. So after looking at the types of loans and the timing of the loans, we move to the third question. That question has to do with your adjusted gross income for the year 2020 or 2021. It's either or, not and. So if you met these income thresholds, then you could be considered eligible for relief through the plan. If you are a single taxpayer, or if you're married but filed separately, then the income cap is $125,000 for you. And again, that's for either 2020 or 2021. If you are a borrower who is married and filing jointly, or if you file as head of household, then the income cap rises to $250,000. So if your adjusted gross income for either 2020 or 2021 is under those thresholds, then that makes you eligible for relief through this plan. To verify your adjusted gross income, you would need a copy of your personal income tax return. You want to look at Form 1040, and I believe it's line 11. That will show you your adjusted gross income. So if you've answered yes to all three of those questions, then you should be eligible for up to $10,000 worth of cancellation. There's additional cancellation that's available to people who can answer yes to the following two questions. The first of those questions is your balance on loans borrowed for your own education greater than $10,000? This is specifically, basically weeding out Parent Plus loan borrowers. If the only types of loans you have are Parent Plus loans, then the maximum amount of relief you would receive through this plan is $10,000. However, if you have Parent Plus loans that you took out for your child's education and student loans that you took out for your own education, the student loans of your own could help you become eligible for additional relief through this plan. So if you owe more than $10,000 on student loans for yourself, you've got one more question to answer to find out if you're eligible for the $20,000. And that question is, did you receive a Pell Grant? If you received a Pell Grant, it doesn't matter when you received the Pell Grant. You could have received one Pell Grant. You could have received a small Pell Grant. You could have received a Pell for your undergraduate education, but only taken out loans during graduate school. Any of those cases, it doesn't matter. As long as you received a Pell Grant, then that's what pushes you to that next level of cancellation. So if you answer yes to all five of these questions, you should be eligible for up to $20,000 worth of cancellation through the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. I want to answer a commonly asked question about the relief and say that this relief does not come in the form of cash. No one is going to receive a check in the mail, for $20,000. What would happen is your current student loan balance would decrease by the amount of cancellation that's applied to your account. For people who owe less than, let's say, $10,000, if you owe $5,000 and you're eligible for $10,000 worth of relief, your eligibility would drop down to the amount of your current balance. So you would receive $5,000 in cancellation. You would not receive a refund for the additional $5,000 of eligibility offered by the program. So it's up to $10,000 or up to $20,000 for that reason. And the relief will come in the form of debt reduction, not actual cash flowing to borrowers. Okay, so that takes care of eligibility for the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. And due to the lawsuits, as of today, the application is not currently open. So no new applications are being accepted. And even for those of us who have been approved, the relief is not being processed because of litigation. All right, so about the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of determining the types of loans you have. If you're not sure about your loans and whether they would be eligible, one clue is that if your loans were included in the payment pause called the CARES Act forbearance that went into effect March 13th of 2020, if your loans were included in that, then your loans are eligible for relief through the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. If you really want confirmation, you can log into studentaid.gov, click View Servicer Details on the dashboard, and you want to look for that Department of Ed in front of the name of your servicer. And just as a reminder for people who have those commercially held federal student loans, the option to consolidate into the direct loan program just for relief through this program is no longer available. That's something that was taken away in late September. But just because that option is not available, it does not mean that you cannot have access to other benefits such as public service loan forgiveness and the IDR adjustment. Okay, so there's still options for you, but at this time, the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan is not an option for people who have commercially held federal student loans. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic, which is the income-driven repayment adjustment, also known as the IDR adjustment, or you may hear some people refer to it as the IDR waiver. Income-driven repayment plans are plans that provide you with a monthly payment that is based on your income and your household characteristics. On the opposite end of the spectrum are balance-driven plans. These are the plans that are simply based on how much you owe and how many years you will take to repay that balance. So with income-driven repayment plans, they are more affordable typically because they're based on your household characteristics. What many people don't know is that income-driven repayment plans actually have cancellation built into the plans. And that cancellation is supposed to come after a borrower has been in repayment for 20 or 25 years. But that depends on the repayment plan that the borrower was enrolled in. So the chart here shares with you the four current income-driven repayment plans. We have income-based repayment, which is known as IBR, income contingent repayment, which is known as ICR, pay as you earn, which some people just call pay or payee, and then revised pay as you earn, which most people refer to as repay. I know I'm throwing out like alphabet soup at you all right now, but trust me, it's easier with the acronyms. So each of these plans has cancellation built in after a borrower has been in repayment for a certain number of years. With income-based repayment, it's 20 or 25 years, depending on when the borrower took out their first loan. So for new borrowers, those are borrowers who borrowed for the first time after July 1st of 2014, the repayment term is 20 years. For others, the repayment term is 25 years. For people who are enrolled in ICR, the repayment term is 25 years, after which cancellation is supposed to take place. For pay as you earn, the term is 20 years. And for revised pay as you earn, it could be 20 years or 25 years, depending on the types of loans that you're repaying under the plan. If all the loans you're repaying under this particular plan are undergraduate loans, then the repayment term is 20 years. If there are any graduate or professional school loans that you're repaying on the plan, then the repayment term jumps up to 25 years. So, regardless of the term length, the important thing is that these plans are supposed to offer cancellation after 20 or 25 years. And this cancellation does not require the borrower to complete any type of service requirement. So it doesn't matter if you work in public service or what your career is. This is for everyone who is enrolled in income-driven repayment plans. Right now, the Department of Education is reviewing repayment history for borrowers who have direct loans and those federally held FFELP loans. The reason is that even though these plans had cancellation that was supposed to be built into them, that cancellation was not taking place. What the department has found is that loan servicers had not been counting the payments. So it's very possible that someone has been paying on a student loan for 25 years, and after that 25th year, they kept paying on the loans because no one was keeping track of whether they met the cancellation requirement of the IDR plan that they were enrolled in. So since payments were not being tracked, there was no way to tell where a person was in terms of meeting that 20 or 25-year repayment term requirement. So given this lack of accuracy in counting, the Department of Education decided to implement this one-time account adjustment. And I want to share with you their exact language from the Office of Federal Student Aid. It's that the department is conducting a one-time revision of IDR payment counters to address past inaccuracies, including automatically discharging loans for eligible borrowers and permanently fixing IDR payment counting by reforming its IDR tracking procedures going forward. In summary, to me, that says Some things didn't happen correctly in the past, and we're going to fix those. And going forward, we want to prevent similar things from occurring in the future. So, this one time revision is underway now, and it applies to borrowers again who have direct loans and federally held federal student loans. The commercially held loans are not included in this, but there is a pathway into eligibility, and I'll discuss that in just a moment. So, when it comes to counting up time and repayment, under normal circumstances, you'd have to make payments each month. You'd have to be enrolled in an income driven repayment plan. Those payments would need to be on time in full as promised. But through this one time adjustment, there are some other months that will be included. And here's what they're looking for. Time toward IDR forgiveness will include first, any months in which you had time in a repayment status, regardless of the payments made, the loan type, or the repayment plan. So what this means is it doesn't matter if you were late. It doesn't matter if your payment was short. It doesn't matter if you weren't even enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. If you had a direct loan or a federally held federal student loan, then your time in repayment would count toward IDR forgiveness. The second thing is if you were a person who had loans that were placed in forbearance for 12 or more months consecutively, or 36 or more months cumulatively, those months will count toward IDR forgiveness because forbearances are not supposed to exceed 12 months consecutively or 36 months over the life of a federal student loan. The third thing is that months that were spent in deferment prior to 2013 can count, with the exception of in-school deferments. When loans go into an in-school deferment, no payments are required. But if there's another type of deferment that your loans were in prior to 2013, that time can count toward IDR forgiveness. Fourth and finally, any time that you were in repayment prior to consolidation on consolidated loans. So if you just consolidated a loan earlier this year, they would look at the history of that loan, but they would also go back and examine the history of the original loans that went into the consolidation loan. And the idea is that by going back and counting this repayment history, they'll be able to figure out if these borrowers have met the requirement of having been in repayment for 20 years or 25 years. And I believe the estimate is that about 40,000 people, as a result of this one-time revision, would receive automatic cancellation of their debt because they've satisfied that repayment requirement of 20 or 25 years. So, as a result, beginning in November of 2022, borrowers with loans that have accumulated time in repayment of at least 20 or 25 years, and that depends on the types of loans they have and the repayment plans that they were enrolled in, they'll begin to see automatic forgiveness. And it doesn't matter if they were enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. In July 2023, we expect that all borrowers will begin to see their accounts updated. So at least they'll know where they stand relative to the 20 or 25 years required to gain cancellation through income-driven repayment. Quick note here, this is just a reminder for people with those commercially held or commercially managed loans. Those include FELP loans, Perkins loans, HEAL loans, which stands for Health Education Assistance Loan, or other non-direct loans. If those loans are managed by a commercial bank, then you would need to consolidate or apply for consolidation by May 1st of 2023 in order to get the full benefits of this one-time account adjustment. I just want to take a moment to stress that this is a one-time adjustment. This is not something that we expect to see again. So if you have those commercially held loans and you want to get the most credit possible toward that payment count, then you would want to make sure that you take action to complete the application to consolidate by May 1st of 2023. Also, if you're in default, you could still benefit from this IDR adjustment. You want to make sure that you get those loans out of default and into a favorable status before July of 2023. You can get information on that by visiting studentaid.gov, looking at your servicer details, and reaching out to the default resolution group. All right, so I wanted to give you all an example of how the income-driven repayment adjustment could really affect a real borrower. So this example is from someone that I've been working with, and it has to do with a 16-year-old FFEL consolidation loan that is currently held by a commercial bank. So when the borrower took out this loan in 2006, the original principal amount was $14,500. The current balance is a little bit more than $11,100. That's after 16 years in repayment. The payment plan that they're enrolled in is called Select 2. And I've got to be honest, some of these FFELP loan repayment plans, I have no idea what Select 2 means. But Select 2 is the name of the repayment plan. And this plan requires that the borrower makes a payment of $73 per month. Of that $73 payment, $41 is going toward interest and $32 is going toward principal. So right away, we can look at those numbers and tell it's going to take a long time to pay off this loan if the borrower continues to pay just $73 per month. The repayment term that's listed on this loan is 248 months, which is the same thing as 20 years and 8 months. The borrower has already been in repayment for 16 years on this consolidation loan. And even though the repayment term is listed at 20 years and 8 months, the expected payoff is 2042. So if we look at the life cycle of this loan, if the borrower continues on this track, it would take 36 years altogether to pay off this loan. And that's not supposed to happen. What's supposed to happen with the income-driven repayment plans is that cancellation kicks in after the borrower has made payments for 20 or 25 years, depending on the type of income-driven repayment plan that they're enrolled in. This particular borrower is not enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. They are currently enrolled in Select 2. So in order to benefit from this one-time IDR adjustment, they would want to consolidate those commercially held FFELP loans by May 1st or complete the application by May 1st of 2023. We would expect then that in July of 2023, they would receive an updated payment count to let us know where they stand relative to that 20 or 25 year requirement. But the bottom line for this borrower is that repayment could end well before 2042. And that's what I like to see. We know that this borrower started repayment in 2006. If they were a person who only had a 20-year obligation, then this loan could be paid off in 2026 instead of 2042. So this shows us how there's potential to save 16 years worth of payments by consolidating this loan and waiting for the IDR adjustment to update and give us a status on how many payments this borrower has made relative to what's required for cancellation through IDR. And that's 20 years or 25 years of repayment. I know that this is not an isolated situation. There are many borrowers who have commercially held FFELP loans, and they could benefit from the IDR adjustment. And like I said, this example just shows you how this could really be life-changing for someone and save them from 16 years worth of student loan payments if they take action. All right. So, there's a little error on this slide, pardon that, but I wanted to give you all a bit of information about the next program, which is Public Service Loan Forgiveness. Public Service Loan Forgiveness has been in the news, not quite as much as the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan, but it's been in the news because the program was overhauled last October through a temporary change called the Limited PSLF Waiver. I just wanted to share with you all how that waiver has affected Maryland. Overall, there have been 6,810 Marylanders as of the end of October 2022 who have had a total of more than $465 million canceled through public service loan forgiveness. The limited PSLF waiver expired on October 31st of this year, but there are plenty of applications that were in the pipeline before that deadline, and those applications have to be reviewed. I did notice through a resource provided by an actual PSLF applicant that the pace of approval slowed down in October. So I'm hoping that we'll see that pace speed up as the servicer continues to work through those applications that are in the pipeline. But this is amazing. $465 million worth of forgiveness as of the end of October of this year. So with public service loan forgiveness, there is an obligation to work in public service. So this program has more requirements than the income-driven repayment adjustment and the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. So I just wanted to show you all the original rules of PSLF and I'll give you a couple of updates on where this program is going. So with public service loan forgiveness, there are 5 requirements, and we'll go through each of these in detail. First is that you have to make 120 qualifying payments. Second is that those payments have to be made on direct loans only. Third is that you have to be enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan for the payments to count. Fourth is that the payments have to be made while you are working for a qualifying employer. And fifth is that you still have to remain working for a qualifying employer when you apply for and when you receive PSLF. These are the original PSLF rules, okay? Not the rules of that temporary overhaul that went on from October of 2021 to 2022. Now, I want to show you how the rules under the original version of PSLF stack up against the rules of that temporary overhaul called the limited PSLF waiver. So the original rules of PSLF that I went through are on the far left. On the far right side, you'll see the rules of the limited waiver. We dropped down from 5 requirements down to 2. Those 2 requirements are, first, that the borrower has 120 periods of repayment. It doesn't matter if they actually made payments, if the payments were late, if the payments were short a few dollars or cents. It just has to be periods of repayment. And the second requirement, of course, is that the borrower was working full time and directly for a qualifying employer at the time that those payments were made. Now, many of us were hoping that the PSLF, the limited waiver, was extended past October 31st of this year, but it did end. Fortunately, many of its provisions are going to continue through the IDR adjustment until May 1st of 2023. That's why it's really important for people who have those commercially held FFELP loans to take action if they want to have their loans considered for relief through the IDR adjustment. I also wanted to share that there are permanent changes to PSLF that are going into effect July 1st of 2023, which should make it easier for more people to satisfy the requirements of the programs. So lots of change in the past year and more changes coming up. The 5 requirements of public service loan forgiveness, I'm going to breeze through these because I know that they're going to change a bit in July and that many of them have been relaxed through both the waiver and the IDR adjustment period that we're in. But the first requirement has to do with the qualifying payments. Public service loan forgiveness is going to take you a minimum of 120 months. And the months that are up for consideration are those that occurred after October 1st of 2007. Under the original program rules, all of your payments had to be made on time in full. Extra payments would not qualify, so there's nothing you can do to speed up the process. But one popular myth is that the payments had to be consecutive. This is not true. It is true that consecutive payments will get you to public service loan forgiveness faster. But if your payments are not consecutive, that doesn't mean that you cannot get public service loan forgiveness. It just means that it'll take you a bit longer to get there because you had gaps in those qualifying payments. Some good news here for people who have worked in public service throughout the CARES Act forbearance that started on March 13th of 2020. As long as you have qualifying employment, the months of 0 payments will count toward the 100 payments that you need for PSLF. So by the time the CARES Act forbearance ends, people will have had roughly 3 years worth of payments counting toward PSLF while not having had to make actual payments. So those 0 payment months do count. The second requirement here is that you have to have the right types of loans. Direct loans are the only types of loans that qualify for PSLF under the original program rules. There's a bit of an extra step for people who have Parent Plus loans. If they want those loans to be considered for public service loan forgiveness, the loans have to be consolidated into the direct consolidation loan program, and then they can enroll in the one income-driven repayment plan that's available to parents, and that's called the income contingent repayment plan. So summary here is that direct loans are the only ones that qualify for PSLF under original program rules. The third requirement has to do with your qualifying repayment plans. All of the income-driven repayment plans count toward public service loan forgiveness, in addition to the 10-year standard plan. But the income-driven plans are most likely to be the most affordable plans. Those are the ones that will most likely leave you with a balance to forgive after 10 years worth of payments. And again, a special note for parents. ICR, which is the Income Contingent Repayment Plan, is the only plan that's available for people who are repaying Parent Plus loans. The fourth requirement has to do with employment, and this is the big one here. Many people think that it's the actual job they have within an organization that determines their eligibility for public service loan forgiveness, but that's not true. It actually has to do with the type of organization that you work for. So, who you work for matters more than what you actually do. The types of employers that qualify for public service loan forgiveness are government agencies from the federal level all the way down to tribal agencies, as well as 501c3 tax exempt organizations and certain other nonprofit organizations that provide qualifying services to the public can be considered as qualifying employers for PSLF. So it doesn't matter if you are an accountant, a librarian, a member of the facilities crew, that doesn't matter. If you work for one of these types of organizations, then your employer is what determines whether you are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. There are a couple of activities that are ruled out, such as partisan political organizations, labor unions, and also members of U.S. Congress. Their work does not qualify for PSLF. But if your employment is for a government agency, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, or certain other types of nonprofits, then the odds are in your favor, and you can verify whether your employer qualifies at studentaid.gov/PSLF. PSLF also requires full-time employment. Generally speaking, if you work an average of more than 30 hours per week, then you could be considered eligible for this program. If you have multiple jobs that are all for qualifying employers and the number of hours you work combined is more than 30 hours per week, then you also meet that definition of being a full-time employee. And again, you can go to studentaid.gov/PSLF to get more information about qualifying employment. Now, the fifth and final requirement under the original rules of public service loan forgiveness is that you must be working for a qualifying employer, both at the time your PSLF application is submitted and at the time that loan forgiveness is received. So this particular requirement would mean that someone who had a lengthy career for a qualifying employer but retired could not get public service loan forgiveness under these rules because they're no longer working for a qualifying employer. For some people, they might apply anyway and find out that they're so close that they're willing to go back to work in order to secure this benefit. But I just wanted to give you all a recap of the 5 original rules of PSLF so that you could see what kind of prompted the creation of the limited PSLF waiver. So under those original rules, 98% of people who applied for public service loan forgiveness were rejected, and that was between October of 2017 and October of 2021. So less than 20,000 people had their applications approved for public service loan forgiveness. After the waiver went into effect from October of 2021 to the end of October 2022, that number has increased to more than 215,000. So we are looking at a huge increase in the number of approved applicants, and that is directly due to the implementation of the limited PSLF waiver. The waiver, as I mentioned before, I really wanted it to be extended past the October 31st deadline, and I'm happy that many of its provisions have been extended. But there are some people who are affected by the fact that the entire waiver did not get extended beyond the deadline of October 31st. And I just wanted to share a bit about those 3 groups. The first group, as I just spoke about briefly, was retirees. Under the waiver, a person who's retired could have been able to achieve public service loan forgiveness because the requirement to remain working in a public service career at the time of application and receipt of PSLF was temporarily waived. That requirement has been reinstated. So for retirees, there's not an option to secure PSLF right now if you applied after the waiver expired and you're no longer working in public service. Doesn't mean you can't go back to work and apply again, but as of right now, if you are not working and you applied right now, under the program's original rules, you would not be able to receive that public service loan forgiveness because of your lack of current employment. The second group is Parent Plus loan borrowers. Parent Plus loan borrowers can earn credit for the IDR adjustment. So their past repayment history can be evaluated. They can gain credit toward that IDR adjustment, but those months will not count toward public service loan forgiveness unless they would have counted toward PSLF under the program's original rules. This differs from the waiver. There were some Parent Plus loan borrowers that were able to consolidate their Parent Plus loans along with their own student loans and get to forgiveness faster on all of that debt. But unfortunately, they're not going to count the months from the IDR adjustment toward PSLF unless those months meet the original requirements of PSLF. The last group that's affected is people who are pursuing teacher loan forgiveness. The same years of service used for teacher loan forgiveness can no longer count toward PSLF. During the waiver, those programs could overlap. Teacher loan forgiveness takes 5 years, PSLF takes 10. If you pursued both under the rules of the waiver, it would take you 10 years to meet both sets of requirements at minimum. But now that the waiver has expired, we're back to the original rules, where if you want teacher loan forgiveness, you'd have to complete 5 years of service. If you want public service loan forgiveness, you'd have to complete an additional 10 years of service. So all in all, that's 15 years. All right, I know that we are winding down and it's definitely time to get to some questions, but I could not leave you without sharing some resources. The first, of course, is studentaid.gov, the best place to go for information about your federal student loans, verifying the types of loans you have, completing the application to consolidate if you choose to do so, and applying for public service loan forgiveness. Of course, I have to share the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. You can find us at mccfw.org. We are also on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness at the MCCFW. The state of Maryland has several resources for student loan borrowers, and you can find them at smartstart.maryland.gov. There is information about the Maryland Mortgage Program, the Maryland Student Loan Debt Relief Tax Credit, as well as loan assistance repayment programs. You can find all of that at smartstart.maryland.gov. Additionally, the state of Maryland has a student loan ombudsman. So if you have any issues with your student loan servicers or certain types of complaints, you can file a complaint with the ombudsman. And if your complaint matches the criteria that they look for, they can conduct an investigation and hopefully help you achieve resolution. Two other sites that I like are freestudentloanadvice.org and cancelmystudentdebt.org. Both of them have plenty of information. And the last site, cancelmystudentdebt.org, it lays things out in a step-by-step format so that you can take a look at your loans, figure out which steps are for you, and then see what happens next. As for the Institute of Student Loan Advisors, their founder created the PSLF Megathread on Reddit. And I think that is a great tool to use because you can combine the information that you see online at studentaid.gov or the information that I've shared during this webinar. You can combine that information with information from borrowers who are applying for these benefits real time. And you can hear about the timelines that they're experiencing, the hurdles, the victories. It just gives you a different view of the experience, particularly from the borrower's perspective. So these are some of my favorite resources. And now that we've wrapped things up, I would love to take the opportunity to answer any questions that I can and encourage you. If you have questions that come up after this, you can reach out to me on social media. I am on Facebook as Dr. Tisa Silver Canady, Twitter and Instagram at Tisa Silver. And again, the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness is at the MCCFW.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Dr. Tisa. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be happy to ask them of Dr. Tisa.
Thank you. I know that was a lot of information.
Very useful, though. Very
Great,
useful. And I
great.
do have some prepared questions if no one
Okay,
has one in the chat. So,
okay,
all right. I don't see anything coming in, so I can ask you one of my first questions.
okay.
So the student loan payment pause just got extended. What do you recommend doing during the pause?
Okay.
Should you try paying? Are there other avenues?
So that's a popular question. A lot of people look at debt and say, well, if I have this period where payments aren't due and interest isn't accruing, I should just pay it off. And for some people, that's excellent advice. Student loan debt operates differently from other forms of debt, especially in the sense that there are opportunities for forgiveness. You're not going to see credit card forgiveness, coming anytime soon. So if there's an interest-free opportunity and there's a greater opportunity for you to attack the principal, then I'd say absolutely go for it with those other forms of debt. But with student loan debt, because we have this kind of benefit that might happen, if you pay off the debt, you might not have any debt to take advantage of that benefit. Now, there are opportunities for people to request refunds if they've paid down their certain types of student loans and want to have access to that program. But to me, that just adds another complication to it. So what I personally would do, if you were thinking about paying down the debt aggressively right now during this payment pause, I would suggest, and this is my personal opinion, not as a financial advisor or anything else like that. My personal approach would be to take the money that you would pay each month toward that debt and pay it to yourself in a dedicated savings account that you promise not to touch. And then, pending whatever the outcome is for the student debt relief plan, if it doesn't happen, you can take that lump sum and you can make a payment. If it does happen, you can take that money that you saved and you can do something else with it. The only reason that I suggest paying yourself instead of paying off the debt is because there is a potential benefit. And if you're eligible for that benefit, and you want to take advantage of it, then paying yourself would make it easier for you to take advantage of that benefit instead of paying down the debt, trying to get a refund, then waiting to see if the relief will come through. So that's my personal choice, though.
Great, thank you. And we did just get a question in the chat from Charlotte
Okay.
asking, uh, thanking for all this information, but they had unfortunately missed a lot of the session. The first question is, will you have access to this recording? Yes, the recording will be available on our YouTube, PGCMLS, after the conclusion of this event. And you can go ahead and put, if you have a second question in there in the chat, Charlotte. Okay, so Charlotte said that they consolidated their direct loans in 2019 with a private lender. Is their loan still eligible for forgiveness? They also work at a nonprofit.
Okay. So if the loans were consolidated out of the federal government and into a consolidation loan with a private lender, then the loans would not be eligible for federal student loan benefits. The reason is that once you leave that realm of consolidating with the federal government, the debt is paid off and a new debt is originated with that new private lender. And since those private lenders operate outside of the federal government, private loan borrowers are not able to receive benefits that are reserved for federal student loan borrowers. So unfortunately, the answer is no.
Thank you. And does anyone else have any questions that is viewing right now? You can go ahead and pop them in the chat. If not, we have a few more minutes and I have a few other questions I could ask.
Okay.
All right. So, the other question I have prepared is if I haven't yet taken out loans or am planning to return to school, how should I take all of this information about loan forgiveness into the idea of taking out a new loan?
Wow. Okay. So one thing I would say is um, borrow, of course, just borrow if you need to, but please do not just borrow whatever's offered just because it's offered. Because as you can see, this is complex stuff. Okay. And for people, who don't have backgrounds in finance, it can be intimidating to try to work through all of these different potential benefits, apply, read the correspondences from servicers, and try to sort out what they're truly eligible for. And that also doesn't bode well for wellness. And that's the lens that I'm coming from. So if you can avoid borrowing, please do. But if you have to borrow, as long as you go in fully informed, then I'm confident that you'll be able to pick a repayment strategy that works for you because there are plenty that are out there. If you're on the front end, I would encourage you to not only look at the financial aid options that are available from the federal government. I would encourage you to visit state government. The Maryland Higher Education Commission has state scholarships and grants. They also have loan repayment assistance programs for people who already have debt. So you can visit MHEC and create an MD CAPS account if you are a prospective college student. And that way, if you are awarded state grants or scholarships, you'll already have the account in place for them to alert you that you're receiving the award and you can actually receive it. Um, the other thing that I would say is do not, and I haven't come across many people who have had this approach, but there was a fear among some people that if a lot of people heard about cancellation, they would think, oh, well, I'll just take out the loans and they'll get canceled. This is not routine. Cancellation is not something that we've seen before, and it might be something that we never see again. So please do not think that just because the option is being discussed right now, that means it will happen again. You still want to be responsible with your borrowing so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you can't afford to repay the debt, or you are really looking to cancellation as your only way to get out. So borrow responsibility, take advantage of federal resources, state resources, and also, if I might add, please get to know your financial aid counselor at your school. Because your financial aid counselor is the person who is going to look at the resources that are available to you from the federal government, from the state government, from the institution. They'll also receive word of any private scholarships you receive. They're going to be the people that are putting all of this information together to get you in a place where hopefully you can afford to pay for your higher education experience. It helps if they know you, and I think that it also can only help more if they know you and not just in the context of you calling and asking, where's my money? So stop by, say hello, ask them if there's anything else that you can do to have a smoother experience when it comes to paying for college. If there are any additional sources of scholarships or grants that the school has, and just get to know them, establish a relationship. I think it can only enhance the experience.
Okay, great. So we're rolling into the end of this session. I want to say thank you to everyone who came. And of course, thank you to Dr. Tisa. You provided so much information that I definitely didn't have. Um, and if you missed any part of the presentation today, you can see the full recording on our YouTube page shortly after the conclusion of the event. Be sure to watch out for more programming from the Commons and PGCMLS. In addition to focusing on financial information, we also have programming in career and job readiness, digital production, social justice, and entrepreneurship that will be part of the Commons umbrella. And I hope to see everyone soon. Thank you so much for a wonderful program.
Thank you.